I remember when I was about 2, a little older than that, I realized that when I said I was referring to me. I was absolutely shocked by that. That was the first perception I had that it was really astounding. You know, children before that age called themselves Johnny wants a cookie. You know, they know there's somebody there. They take the word of the adults, and they have to accept the name, Johnny. I guess it's Johnny. And that's the way it goes. And then finally you say, I want a cookie. Well, if it's at that moment that the rational ego comes into play. And the feeling is that animals do not have the rational ego. So we were just up in doing some whale watching, my wife and I, with another man who's here, and there was someone there who knew a lot about the Eskimos. And he said that among the Eskimos, for example, they will say, a hunter will go out and kill a seal, and he'll say, somebody killed a seal today. And he'll bring the seal in, and of course if somebody killed it, it belongs to everybody. So he never claims credit for having killed it, nor does he claim any special part of it. So therefore, the Eskimos are aware that this rational ego is such a threat that they try verbally and in every way to diminish its tyranny. Very clever, very wonderful, very wonderful. So I'll talk now for a little bit on something that I've been brooding about for a year and a half or so. And some of it, if you want elaborations of this, you should buy the greatest book on Shakespeare that's ever been written, has been published, by Ted Hughes. Name of the book is called Shakespeare and the Goddess of Complete Being. Now, there's one remark in there. He says that at Shakespeare's time, Queen Elizabeth had kept down the Catholics' anger against the Protestants and the Protestants' anger against the Catholics for 30 years. And it was all boiling down there. And it came up in the men of Shakespeare's time. So they felt, as Protestants, they felt this terrible fear of the Great Mother as the Virgin Mary, about to eat and kill them all. And the Catholics felt that they were holding on to the Great Mother, which had been worshipped for centuries, and these Protestants were about to come in and kill her, and that this incredible stuff surfaced in Shakespeare and came out in the plays. And he said the emotional life of the men at that time was so burning and had so much passion and energy in it that when they were through with that, England became a black dwarf emotionally. That's an interesting way to try to explain what happened to the English. They're like a great comet that suddenly burned itself out and became a black dwarf. And now they won't touch any of the questions. So we're going to look at the whole world now through the small eyes of the rational ego. You know, the rational ego is not to be made fun of. It is some principle that comes along in an extremely wild world to defend yourself and your I. Among wild horses, it may not be needed because all the wild horses could confront whatever enemy is out there. But with human beings, this thing called the I appears, and the word rational is on it for reasons you'll see in a minute. So what does the rational ego see when it looks out? It sees a mother which is on its side, some mothers. It sees sofas and so on which are on its side and not dangerous. And then it looks out and sees a fantastic amount of dangerous, unbelievable, wild, thorny, cars, insane fathers that scream. You understand me? So the feeling is that, I'll just say a word here about the rational ego. It oversees the attempt of a man to live an ordered and prudent life. He creates the Puritan ideal. In our time, he's a fundamentalist. Well, so you imagine two poles of energy. The rational ego makes up one pole. The rational ego controls a human being's behavior according to the demands that are laid out in the society, in accordance with that person's own desire for order or control. So the rational ego is the president of your world. It's the tyrant. It's the Oz figure. At the other pole, Hughes has this, the totality of an individual's natural, biological, and instinctive life. The totality includes a divine source of being, the feminine component he has inside, as well as all the intuitive powers and all the mysteries outside the rational ego. And all of that seems to him coterminous with nature. And generally, the man will call all of this the goddess. Why? Well, the major idea is that the rational ego thinks in opposites. It can't think any other way. So therefore, if the rational ego is in a male, then for the male, the rational ego has a feeling of being male. That means everything else is female. So when it's inside the house in its own little room and it looks out and sees the incredible forest and trees and everything, that's the other. So we're coming into this whole question of the other. Does a young girl have a male ego or a female ego? If she feels her ego to be male, then she too would find nature hostile. And there are a lot of white women who feel nature is hostile. They too do this splitting. If her rational ego is felt by her as female, she would still do the splitting, but then the dangerous part of the whole world would be called male. Is that right? Whoa. Well, you're experiencing some of that. For a lot of the women, the whole dangerous part of the world is called the male world. So we're not going to talk about that. We're going to come back to where we are, which is that our ego, our rational ego, feels itself as male, immediately goes into oppositional thinking, so that your own biological body is considered to be an opposite of you. Your body is thought to be female because it shits when it wants to. I mean, it's uncontrollable. It's uncontrollable, like women. You can't control it. So therefore, that's incredible. And that's how you develop a 40-year-old man who doesn't know anything that's going on in his own body. Is that right? So we're just going into this question here of what is this little rational ego going to do? It feels, thinking oppositionally, that its own body is something other, that the nature is other, everything, that an unbelievable group of beings and creatures and mice and everything is. Well, it can surrender 3 times. One, as a tiny infant, it can just surrender to it. Probably we do that before the age of 2. We just surrender as an infant. Secondly, as an ecstatic worshiper of God, you can surrender. And that's a fully adult man. Rumi's in that category to some extent. Just completely surrenders. They dance for 14, 18 hours. Rational ego is not there. And Rumi always says, you're having trouble? Try not sleeping. You know, sing until dawn. Be like a bucket that pulls up the dark water right up into the sunlight. Do you feel that? The dark water that you thought was other is going to be pulled up into the sunlight. So Rumi is just a master in this. And you could also surrender as a saint. Someone like St. Francis, even if he didn't dance or sing, he surrenders. And remember, he says, brother sun, brother moon, his famous prayers. All the splitting is gone. But in contemporary times, the adult does not surrender. So, what we're going to talk about now is that the rational ego splits the goddess into 2 parts. Now, I go back to this idea that here we're not talking about the Great Mother as a mythical being. We are not talking about her as something that is worshipped in Babylon or Egypt. We're talking about how the rational ego looks out, sees nature, sees it so immense, is immediately told it's female, and gives it the name the goddess. So, what do you do when you look out and see this enormous female presence? Female would be right anyway, wouldn't it? Because your mother's the one that's the first enormous thing you meet. So, the rational ego splits the goddess into 2 parts. One part supports the rational existence that you're having, and the other part threatens and disrupts it. So he makes a sacred binding contract with the part of the goddess that he feels likes him, and he makes an effort to suppress and kill all the rest. So we could spend a long time looking at the massive implications of this fearful landscape as it's seen as a child from the ego. Now, Shakespeare says that 4 characters develop out of this little split, this big split. And we'll go over those in turn. First character would be the rational ego. Shakespeare, in the first books he did called Venus and Adonis, has Adonis being approached by Venus. And in the ordinary classical ones, they both want to make love, and they do. Shakespeare changes it. He has a fully grown woman, Venus, coming towards Adonis and saying, let's make love, let's do this, let's do this. And the man says, no, I don't think so. I need some time to think. I need space for myself. And he doesn't want to make love with her. And it's interesting because Shakespeare noticed that this man was coming in England who doesn't want any connection with the female, with the great mother. He saw it in his friends. His first sonnets were written to this man who wouldn't get married. Remember that one? All those early sonnets are saying, all right, so. What happens in the story is wonderful because they each have horses and the horses are tied. And suddenly the female horse breaks away and the male horse breaks the thing, goes over, and they do this great fucking together, the male horse and the female horse. Well, that means the biological world is flooding in, and Shakespeare's character says, forget it, and jumps on the woman, and that's how that goes. But it took horses in the biological world to get him to overcome his fear. Is that right? So that's interesting. Now that's how that goes. In our time, he becomes a man of distance, the nuclear scientist, the head of the sociology department, the bureaucrat who feels nothing, the thinker or the computer technician. In poetry, he may be an intelligent writer like John Ashbery, whose chaos is completely sanitary, and the infinite distance from himself and the reader in his own poem seem to us almost natural. So I'm trying to say that we're coming into a place in which these distances are so immense that they're evading literature. In ordinary life, we may find a husband who's unable to be playful or can't talk about his feelings. So a good text for that also is Ernest Becker's book called Denial of Death. The rational ego does not want to even admit that we may die. Death is a part of the uncontrollable part of the universe. Well, okay. We just want to mention how deep the terror is that the rational ego has. Grendel in Beowulf. Remember Grendel? Grendel's mother underneath the pond. And the original story says, did they live in this place in the woods? It is a pond. Even though a deer may be chased by dogs and comes to the edge of that pond, they will allow themselves to be killed rather than to go and swim in that pond. So even as adults, our fear of that is tremendous. Our fear of coming near what is called a fully grown woman, what is called the witch, what is called female anger, all of those are part of that uncontrollable part of the universe. And probably when we saw our mother get angry when we were very small, she's part of it. So we come now into the second character. Second character that develops is the part of the universe that the rational ego finds helpful. She's supportive, unconditionally devoted, absolutely reliable, all-giving, full of feeling and heart. She's a composite. He projects her as a perfect mother, perfect daughter, perfect lover. So you may have this incredible fear of the whole world and the biological world and everything when you're 2 years old, 4 years old, 6 years old. Then you get to be 15 and you go to a dance. And there, something's happened to your body, and these girls are over there. And they're like unbelievable. I remember being unable to even go up and ask one for a dance. I mean, my body was trembling, my heart was pounding. Well, she becomes that helpful part of the universe that'll never hurt you. And do you see how much we need that? After 10 or 12 years of getting beat up by boys and our parents and everything, finally, all that idea we have that there must be something in the universe that could hold us and love us appears in front of you as this little girl in the pink dress. It's too much. And so she knows that you're giving her a little too much. But why refuse it? And so you consider her an angel. You got to watch your words, right? You're considering her a divine part of the universe that actually loves you and isn't going to kill you and wipe you out. I mean, that's amazing. And then she'll say, I love you. Oh, no, God. So the question of whether you love her, well, you understand what I'm saying. When a man falls in love with a woman of this sort, he often calls her his soul. So I want you to hear that too. The part of the universe that's favorable to us is our soul. And we get that confused with a living woman. And the people in the Middle Ages understood it. All those poems that they wrote, they had mirrors. They put a mirror in a woman's eyes. And when you looked in there, you saw your own. That image was all over those things. And we're too dumb to know we're looking at our own face. So by naming her his soul, you can tell how dear this composite figure is to a man. How dear this is to think that there's one part of you, that's one part of the universe that'll love you. When a man falls in love with a woman, he may write a book resembling the book I wrote called Loving a Woman in Two Worlds. He loves a woman in this world and he loves a woman in the soul world. And the book says that such a great sweetness appears that it's difficult for a man to distinguish this loved woman from his own soul. When she gets angry, of course, then the distinction becomes clear. But it's amazing how in many parts of courtship that anger doesn't appear. Neither one of them get angry. And that's called heaven.
Or lust.
No. You can have a lust for a whole lot of women that don't in this category. And say you're in love with a woman, or whoever, you're with a woman and you fight and everything, and they say, well, the lovemaking is really good after anger. That's not in this area. That's, good, ordinary animal fucking. So one can say that the human being in the man admires the lover's womanliness, her grace and intelligence. And yet the rational ego is always trying to separate her out from the rest of the universe as perfect wife, reliable beloved. I'll give you a couple other names for this second character. Desdemona is her name. Ophelia is her name. Now in Hamlet he makes very clear how Ophelia is not his mother. He says he thinks he's in love with Ophelia and sees that, and when he sees his mother, pushes her down to bed, screams at her, shouts. So if you want to read that, read some books on Tristan and Isolde, or you can read Chekhov's wonderful story called The Lady with the Dog, which is a great story about this, and two people keeping this love going for 20 or 30 years, because it was more precious to them than anything in the world. All right. So, is that clear now, the second one? All of Keats is connected with the second one. All of the poems of Keats are connected with this second one. And he died before the third character could appear. He was a love poet until he died, because he had found that gorgeous place in the universe which was protective and which loved him. What happens to the rest of us? Why can't we hold the love relationship with this beautiful girl with the pink dress that we saw when we were 16? Why not? Why can't she last?
You're not owning your projection.
Well, projection is the word that's given to that, and it's okay. But the metaphor here is a little different. That there's 3% of the universe which is helpful to you, and you make her a representative of that 3%. Now, there's 97% of the universe that wants to kill your ass. Why can't you hold on to the 3%?
You're a little preoccupied.
You're outnumbered is right. You're outnumbered. So instead of using the psychological things that withdraw the projection and so on, it's simply look at it. All of that uncontrollable stuff, the jungle, Brazil, Tibet mountains, insane people, drunkards, aliens of all sorts, they make up that 97%. You think you can preserve this little thing with her, with the 3%? What about her? I mean, she does have a part of her that is that way. And you really are falling in love with something. She really does have that. And when you fall in love with a woman in a certain way like that, what's in there is absolutely genuine. You're not projecting it. The problem is that she's got a lot of other stuff too. Is that right? The 97% is the part of the universe that has death in it. Is that right? It has disease in it. It has poison in it. It has anger in it. It has rage in it. Farting, burping.
IRS.
See, you can say about Keats, you see that he always remained a love poet with this woman, with the 3%. And because he never went to the other part, then the other part just killed him in tuberculosis. Right? It's got to come out somewhere. Since he didn't recognize it, it killed him. From Keats's point of view, it was all right. It was all right. The third power, then, is the dark goddess. Now, this is the other part of that girl that you didn't see when you fell in love with her. The part of the universe that has huge pythons in it. The part of the universe that's talked about as Kali among the Indians. And she has a wonderful necklace of flowers, white flowers, but occasionally they turn into skulls. Skulls. And she dances and she's eating your intestines. But there's nothing personal in it. So great mythologies develop this to indicate the combined humor and terror of that. And the python is completely non-romantic. Is that right? Eats you without any kind of emotion. Go on.
Talk a little bit about, because in the second, I guess, character, whatever that you were talking about, something that I experienced not too long ago was a real connection with that being.
Yes.
But soon afterwards, I was not conscious of it.
Yes.
But part of me started to kind of revile it, hate it.
Yes.
It was a real love-hate affair because subconsciously I think I was looking for some of that Kali energy, but I wasn't aware of it. And it really made me go through hell until I finally figured out that I need to have some of that and some of the other.
Yeah. It's interesting what he was saying. And I met Marion Woodman the other day, and she sent me a letter, and she's talking about this sweet stuff. And she said, I see it especially in restaurants. I just hate that in women. I didn't understand. I saw it, and I said, what do you mean by that? She said, I sit in restaurants, and they're especially expensive ones, and I see the woman there, and she is thinking completely of the lovemaking on the other side of the dinner, right? But all the time she's feeding the man little compliments. Very sweet. Marion says, you know, that woman, I hate that kind of woman. Because she's not showing her Kali, is that right? You ask her any opinion, she agrees with you. So therefore you yearn for something else. But let's go back then. What is the reason why we can't keep a contact for 20 years with this 3% so beautifully present in a woman there? Well, the dark goddess includes not only the amoral and non-human biological drives for reproduction, but associates herself, being forbidden, with everything forbidden. Everything uncontrollable, natural or supernatural hostility, uniting the world of death with the world of elemental sexuality and so on. So when you start to make love with a woman, you will slowly realize that she's connected with the world of death. Given the rational soul's fear of this part, we can understand why a man can easily assume that even the perfect soul of the good-willed women may prove treacherous. The man is terrified that the perfect wife and the treacherous side of the goddess may be sewn together with some invisible thread. So the problem is that the perfect wife, the one that your soul depends on after all of that brutality of childhood and all of that, that she is the one who is your sole protector and savior in the world, and it occurs to you that she may be connected with the treacherous, even death side of the other part of the goddess. So this ridiculous hatred of Hillary Clinton comes from this. And it's amazing what people will say. They call her Hillary the wife from hell, or they call her Hillary Rodham of hell. And those things are being said in the right-wing journals. And they pick up the image perfectly. So it's impossible to overestimate how much suffering is caused in relationships between men and women by fear that the good wife-daughter, carefully separated by the rational ego from the unpredictable area of the goddess, may somehow rejoin, when the man is not looking, the dark part, and he may wake up one day and find Lady Macbeth in his bed. So you hear me now, that Othello thought, after a lifetime as a warrior and facing incredible odds, and he spoke these things to this young woman, and she had such admiration of his warrior side. Do you remember that? She knew how noble he was, and he said, at last I have found a woman who understands my soul. And then Iago comes up, and he feels that she is. He looks in her eyes. Can this be the same woman? Right? You get that terrible fear when you look in a woman's eyes. Who knows what's underneath there? And I mentioned when I was teaching this a while ago that what he does is to strangle her, to prevent her from going any farther into that. In a way, he's trying to save her soul. He strangles her to save her soul. The more that the man knows about the splitting that the rational ego did when he was 5 or 6 into a universe of which 3% is helpful and 95% is hostile, the more he knows that that happened. And as you say, no blame to him. It happened before he could even talk. And that's what's present in the room. What's present is not the man and his wife. What's present is this unbelievable hostile thing there which he sees as having invaded his wife. And if she knows that, she'd be less likely to go into that stuff. When you tell a woman the way you feel about this without blaming her, and she sees incredible power that her anger can have over you, then the intelligent woman starts to pull back and says, "Whoa, I did not know that. I thought that my anger would have no effect on a man. On the contrary, it causes incredible changes inside." And at that point, the woman will learn that her anger has power, and she will learn not to speak it all the time. Like Robert Moore says, if you come home, John Lee says, you come home with something, and you got that big anger against your wife, I'm going to give you a towel, and you chew on this towel for 15 minutes before you go in the house. And if a woman learns what we're saying here, she'll pick up a towel and chew on it for 15 minutes. And then say to you, "I'm a little disappointed in what you did today." Okay, I can take that. She put on her Desdemona clothes, too, before she says that, to make sure you understand. Now, that's called a savvy woman. And women are learning that more and more. But there are a whole lot of them that don't know that. Okay. So, the less domestic violence there will be in the world. See, I've been trying to understand with Marion Woodman. She wants to do a thing in which we'll talk about how to distinguish the masculine from the patriarchy. That the patriarchy is a very different thing than the masculine. You know, because the masculine patriarchy is damaged the masculine, so they can't be the same thing. And for women to be able to hear the traits of the masculine and that they can love at the same time they hear the traits of the patriarchy, which they already know about, that's important work. And I said to her, another one is to distinguish the female from power. That the problem is when we look at a woman, we may look at with our eyes of a 4-year-old, not our eyes of a 35-year-old. And then we see this enormous, she thinks she has no power at all. But we look at her with our 4-year-old eyes, we see nothing but power. And women are stunned when they realize this. We said this out in Aspen, and the women were talking in the bars up till 1 o'clock in the morning about this possibility, that they had this vast power. And then the question is, how can the man move from looking at, how can you look at a woman with your 35-year-old eyes instead of your 2-year-old eyes? What is that movement? That's the same movement that Thomas is talking about here. That when you realize how the world has been split, then you also have to begin working with your rational soul, educating your rational soul, and saying your rational ego, and saying to the rational ego, "You're wrong about this part. Those trees are not dangerous, and there weren't any giants behind the cupboard. Let me go and show you. Come on, I'll pull back the curtains. You see, there's nothing there." Parents try to do that with children as best they can, but we got to have those curtains pulled away all the rest of our lives. And we also have to go to a woman and, understand that 97% is not there is not going to come into activity in most women. She's going to be angry, which is a healthy thing. And we mustn't mistake her anger for a 97% python coming towards us. So therefore, the more we think about this, the more we can recognize that the world, the 97%, is not hostile. Wordsworth said that all of those mountains up there were very helpful to his soul. So he made that whole mountain range up there part of the 3%, isn't that right? That's why we love him. Whitman did that too. Whitman looked out in this world, and somehow, for him, that rational soul, so afraid, wasn't so afraid. He wasn't afraid of men. He wasn't afraid of loving men. He wasn't afraid of the ocean. Tremendous teaching in that. Okay. So is that clear what we're saying? We all have to work with that and not be stuck where we were. So we got one more here to do. Yep.
One of the one of the depictions of Kali that I'm familiar with is that she's dancing on Shiva
Yeah.
and bringing him to life by doing that.
Well, they say that, but they also say that in that tradition, our tradition is that the male is the active one in the universe, and the female is receptive. That's in Grimm Brothers stories, and so it must be very deep in the culture. In India, they say the woman is the active one in the universe. Not the woman, but the feminine element is active. That'd be the 97 plus the 3. And the male tends to be dreamy. So she's dancing on a dreaming Shiva. And that's like a lot of marriages. Man is down there sort of dreaming. Let's go on and do the fourth one then. The first one is the rational ego itself, which we're imagining here as 2 or 3 years old. Second one is that beautiful being. Poetry is like that beautiful being too, which cares for your soul. And then the third one is the Great Mother, the negative side of the Great Mother. So we have to say one more thing. Remember the snake that we threw out the window? When the Protestants came in, that's what they did with the Great Mother. They threw out the window. Before her, the Christians did it. The Christians only allowed the Virgin Mary. They didn't allow Kali. So they took the whole Kali part and threw it out the window. Is that right? And when Babylon started, one of the traditions is that you kill Tiamat, the great monster, the great female monster. Well, what are you looking at? You're looking at a great male hero killing Marduk, the great monster, the great female monster. So this killing of the female monster has been going on a long time. And if you look at how the splitting took place, you're not surprised. But I want you to think of yourself, how do you feel the Great Mother herself feels about these 2,000-3,000 years of this shit? So we're just saying here, you got an angry Great Mother on your hands. Gotten more angry after the Protestants got in. Was angry even when the Catholics were running it, because they were not pagan. So the way that's said in the fairy stories is that, you remember Sleeping Beauty? When they were going to baptize her, they had only 12 golden plates, and there were 13 Great Mother priestesses or whatever it was in the area, and they didn't invite one because they didn't have a 13th golden plate. And so she didn't get invited to the baptism. And then she said very clearly, I will get this girl. And later she pricks her with a thing and she falls asleep. So therefore it says that when you have offended the Great Mother, she will come and put you to sleep, if she doesn't eat you before that. So we're just saying the same thing as Robert is saying here, that we got a whole cumulative history of offense against the Great Mother and the feminine. It's very old. Right now we're bringing it down to what happened when you were 2 years old. So in a way you don't have blame. You're still going to you experience the accumulated anger. Is that right? The way that's done in Venus and Adonis is that when he refuses to make love to her and eventually does make love to her, she's still offended, and in the fall she turns into a boar and comes in and kills Adonis by sticking that boar right into his groin, and in some cases cut off the testicles, and he bleeds to death from the testicles. That happens in marriages too, have you noticed? So you went through that. You didn't have an interesting marriage. You had a mythological marriage. And I'll tell you another thing. Women are channelers. It's not only a few. I think women are channeling the angry goddess energy now that's been going on for 2,000 years. And that's what happens when you're with a woman now and she starts to tell you what you've done wrong. That's beautiful. That's really anger that's intelligent. And then you watch her. She'll shift up into cold anger, and then she'll shift to rage, and then she'll shift to white rage. And by that time, she's channeling. And that boar is in the room. A woman is not only angry about things that you have done to her. When she gets at a certain stage, she becomes transparent to the anger of the Great Mother for being excluded and thrown out of the window for 3,000 years. And then she turns into a boar, and that boar is in the room heading straight for your groin. And if you don't know that, you belong in a Walt Disney movie. You think she's Bambi? She wants death. She wants your death. What is the fourth person that appears in this thing? Shakespeare says there's a fourth person created in the process that follows from the rational ego's domination and splitting, and it's called the irrational ego. And the irrational ego appears in Shakespeare as the hostile brother, the one who wants his missing inheritance, the bitter, mocking, sarcastic, contemptuous, sleazy-minded, envious, chaotic brother whom the prudent man often notices too late. He is Iago and Thersites, a kind of verbal assassin. But that assassin is inside each man. So each man needs to know that besides the rational ego, which was developed years ago and encouraged by the Puritan culture, there is at this moment inside him a hostile brother, fed in the cradle by one of these offended goddesses, and who didn't get invited to the banquet. And that hostile brother is going to make a move towards you soon. Well, I don't know if this is clear now. The idea is that the 97% controls much of the universe. She can take hold of a man, turn him into a boar, a male boar, and that one will attack you. Othello was not attacked by Desdemona. He was attacked by Iago. Is that clear? Another man. So, the incredible thing about it is that we are afraid of that 97% that's female, forgetting that that one can activate a male, a masculine one who can come towards us in the same way as that one came towards Kennedy. As the same one as that male son of a bitch came toward Martin Luther King. Is that right? Oftentimes the killing doesn't come from the female, it comes from the male. It comes from the hostile brother. And another thing you can say is that if you don't know that there's someone inside of you now, because of our exclusion of the feminine for thousands of years, because of the splitting that we did, because of the number of snakes we have thrown out the window and don't want to deal with, there is in you now a hostile male force who wishes to kill you personally. And that one can give you cancer, can do whatever he wants. So I think, to me, it's the most scary to realize that that one is inside here. And now I'll just say in my own life, I was the favorite of my mother's. So she, in a way, told me that she was a part of the 3%. And in a way, she said, the world is all right, don't worry about it. But then, so I wasn't conscious of the hostile brother inside me. Is that right? My brother became the hostile brother.
Same thing happened to me.
So maybe if we could really see it, then our brothers could be as they are. But the fact is that isn't what happened. And he really did want to kill me in the soul way. He was jealous of everything I wrote. He never read a single word of it. And he was enraged himself because his mother had not. His mother was a 97% for him. So he was infuriated with me for having that gift. You understand me? So therefore, I've lived then with a hostile brother on the outside. And that means I never had a brother. I never really had a brother who treated me as I wanted a brother to be. When men come and give me support, like these men do in others, then they become this brother that I didn't have. And then I can be less afraid of the world, because I can identify where it is. It's not in all men, etc. The idea is to try to become friends with your hostile brother on the inside and the outside before it's too late. And how to do that, it doesn't mean to give in to them, it doesn't mean to agree that you're shit, but just to try to make friends in some way, and writing about it and so on. So anyway, we have to go. That's the end of the day.